At issue tonight, the countdown to the New Hampshire primary. Just 5 days left now, and it's clearly a two-person race among Republicans in the Granite State. We're going to break down our exclusive poll on the race with Suffolk University's David Paleologos. Plus this.
The expectation was we want a strong second place. We got that. We've already exceeded those expectations.
Settling for second place? That's not what Nikki Haley's biggest supporter in New Hampshire said just a month ago. The expectation reset from Governor Sununu. At Issue starts now.
Hello and welcome to another live primetime edition of At Issue. It's a cold night out there across New England, but the campaign trail is red hot as we inch ever so closer to the New Hampshire primary. Thanks for joining us on this Thursday night, everybody. I'm Corey Smith.
And I'm Sue O'Connell. We've got a packed show tonight. Our Matt Pritchard caught up with Nikki Haley, who's taking a much more aggressive tone towards former President Donald Trump. Matt's going to join us live on what she had to say in just a minute.
And we've got two great guests lined up for you. Democrat Jesse Mermel and Luis Jimenez of UMass Boston are both standing by. First, though, we want to talk about the results of our exclusive Suffolk University NBC 10 Boston Globe, New Hampshire tracking poll, and it shows the race getting a bit tighter. Here's who 500 likely Republican voters say is their first choice on the ballot. Former President Donald Trump retaining a comfortable lead, holding steady at 50%. However, you see there, Nikki Haley saw some movement from yesterday's poll. She's gained 2 points and is now at 36%. While Ron DeSantis gained 1 additional point at 6%. 1% of folks surveyed say they'll support someone else. 4% are still undecided, and 2% refused to answer. Now, we're going to get to pollster David Paleologos in just a minute with more on that poll. But let's talk about Nikki Haley. She and her supporters have what they have been craving for months now, and that is basically a one-on-one contest with Donald Trump. Ron DeSantis, he's done campaigning in New Hampshire. He's moving on to South Carolina, and we know Chris Christie and Vivek Ramaswamy are both out of the race.
So the question is she making the most of this laser focus on Trump between the two of them? Folks who can't stand the former president say no, and they're urging Haley to get more aggressive with Trump and to make the differences between the two candidates clearer. Our Matt Pritchard joins us live. Matt, you were covering Haley today. Did you sense maybe a change in her tone?
Yeah, I think that's a fair way to put it, Sue. I've heard Nikki Haley speak for 6, 7 times over the last 3 or 4 months, both here in New Hampshire as well as out in Iowa. And throughout that time, we've seen her take sort of a measured approach to Donald Trump, oftentimes saying that she felt like he was the right president for the right time, but that it's time for a new generational leader. That is really the comment that we have heard over and over again from her. But now that we are in the home stretch for the first in the nation New Hampshire primary, that rhetoric is ratcheting up, and we heard that today during a media scrum. Take a listen.
I win by 17 points against Biden. And Trump can call that a dirty poll all he wants. It was his own pollster that did it. So, look, that's not just a presidency. That's House, that's Senate, that's governorships. That's a mandate to stop the wasteful spending, to secure our border once and for all, to get our kids reading again, to get law and order back in this country, and to have a strong America that we can be proud of. That's what we're pushing for. That's what I think we're going to get done.
And she did not stop there. She also said that Donald Trump is who lost the Republicans, the House, the Senate, the White House. She says that alone should tell voters who the obvious choice is in this race. Even with that, all that aside, she is still trailing Donald Trump, as you guys mentioned in that latest poll that we just released. So she has a lot of ground to catch up. Not nearly as much as she had to do in Iowa, but still some to do over the weekend. And she's got a full slate of events, 6 of them scheduled for tomorrow. Guys,
she's got a lot of ground to make up. Ron DeSantis has a lot of ground to make up, so much so, in fact, that he said, you know what, I'm out of here. The poll numbers showing that it is not just worth it to go to New Hampshire, so he's taking a few days in Florida before he moves on to South Carolina. You caught up with him earlier this week. Do you get a sense that he is in this thing for the long haul, Matt?
Well, he sure seems to think that he will be sticking around for a little bit in this race. He's coming off what he sees as a momentum boost out of Iowa, beating poll expectations and winding up in second place behind Donald Trump. But, of course, we know Donald Trump carried Iowa by nearly 30 percentage points once all was said and done. And Nikki Haley feels like New Hampshire is where she is going to have her momentum boost. So where is it that Ron DeSantis thinks he's going to be able to plant his flag and really make a case of that he should be the Republican nominee for president once we hit the conventions later on in the summer. As you mentioned there, I got a chance to sit down with him on his campaign bus and talk a little bit about our poll and whether or not he thinks he can beat the expectations yet again. Here's what he had to say. You beat the polling expectations there in Iowa that had just come out a day or two beforehand. NBC 10 Boston just released a poll today that shows Trump and Haley sort of at the top, you down at 5%. I guess, do you feel like you can be competitive here, that you can beat the expectations?
Well, we always overperform the poll, so we will do that for sure. Ultimately, what we're doing is accumulating delegates. We accumulated delegates in Iowa. We'll accumulate delegates in New Hampshire.
And that is one strategy to take here that we've heard from some people is fight for second place, collect delegates, and then perhaps weasel your way into the nomination later on, depending on what happens with Donald Trump's different trials and legal troubles that he's dealing with at this point. But of course, most of them would like to win this nomination outright, and it's a question of whether that is a recipe for success. Ron DeSantis, of course, now wanting to move on to South Carolina and try and build up again that momentum that he's looking for. I got to ask Nikki Haley about that today and whether or not she thinks it'll be a winning strategy for the governor of Florida. Ambassador, Governor DeSantis is already heading to South Carolina this weekend. Do you think he could actually give you a challenge in your home state?
He's closer to zero than he is to me. I mean, he's invisible in New Hampshire. He's invisible in South Carolina. We're focused on Trump. That's the key. We were focused on DeSantis in Iowa. We're no longer focused on him. It's Trump in New Hampshire and Trump in South Carolina.
Yeah, pretty stark words there. No getting around anything there from the former UN ambassador. And remember, she also backed out of 2 debates that would have taken place here in New Hampshire because she believes she should be debating Donald Trump. And if he's not going to be on the stage, then it's not worth for her to be there either. Guys?
All right, Matt Pritchard live for us in New Hampshire tonight. Matt, we appreciate it. Let's go and get back to our exclusive poll. And joining us for a closer look at the numbers, David Paleologos, director of the Suffolk University Political Research Center. David, we appreciate you taking the time. Let's stay with Nikki Haley. She did see some movement in the right direction for her, but she's not really peeling any support away from the former president, is she?
That's the problem, right? So Trump's fixed at 50, Ron DeSantis is at 6, and even if she picks up every extra point, she's still going to fall short. So what she needs to do is change the actual proportions of who votes in New Hampshire next Tuesday. If she does that, maybe a surprise is in the works. If she doesn't, people could walk away from her and Trump could even extend his lead.
So, David, this poll is showing that Trump, as you said, is really steady at 50%. You're not getting a sense that folks surveyed are going to move their support. They're set in stone. So Nikki Haley has to look elsewhere. Where is she looking?
Well, she has to look at DeSantis voters first because he's got the biggest block of votes and make the case that she is the alternative to Donald Trump. Now, we know from second choice votes, DeSantis votes aren't automatic Nikki Haley votes like Chris Christie's were. As a matter of fact, disproportionately more of DeSantis votes would rotate to Trump over Nikki Haley. So she's kind of between a rock and a hard place. This is the type of situation where you need the governor's infrastructure and get out the vote operation to bump up the numbers. You noted in the earlier segment that Governor DeSantis outperformed the polls by a few points. Well, that was due to the fact that he had infrastructure by virtue of the endorsement of the governor of Iowa. Now you've got Nikki Haley in the same situation. So that get out the vote operation could maybe make up the difference between her deficit and the poll points.
So, of course, we're going to keep our eyes out for tomorrow's poll to see if there's any more movement. But with Ron DeSantis having stopped campaigning in New Hampshire, it's weird to see where the numbers might go. And, of course, yeah, we're all focused on Tuesday's primary. But I want to look ahead by going back to a poll you all conducted last week of likely New Hampshire voters. And it was about abortion. 55% of the 1,000 voters you surveyed said their opposition to the Supreme Court overturning the federal right to an abortion is, quote, the main or, quote, among the factors motivating their vote. Obviously, that could have a major impact in November's election, regardless of who is the Republican candidate, right?
Absolutely. If you go back to November of 2022, Senator Hassan was challenged by a Republican named Don Bolduc, who was a Trump-endorsed Senate nominee in New Hampshire. And there were polls saying that Bolduc was competitive even or within a few points. And from our polling in 2022, independent women broke from independent men. Independent men voted for Bolduc by about 10 points, but independent women supported Hassan 65-19, over 3-1 in that race. And the key issue to independent women was the overturn of Roe versus Wade. That's daunting. Those are daunting numbers when within party affiliation, gender splits that dramatically. And so in New Hampshire, and that's probably why New Hampshire will be a safe state, at least from the polling today, for Joe Biden and the Democrats.
All right. David Paleologos with Suffolk University. We are looking forward to tomorrow's numbers. And of course, we'll keep talking to you as we inch closer to Tuesday's primary. David, thanks so much for joining us.
5 a.m. tomorrow.
There you go. All right, let's go ahead and bring in our guest to the conversation. Joining us tonight, Jesse Mermel, who served as communications director for former Governor Deval Patrick and is now the president and founder of the progressive consulting firm DeWitt Impact Group, and Luis Jimenez, associate professor of political science at UMass Boston. All right, Nikki Haley has had a bit of a tough stretch, right? Third place finish in Iowa, Chris Christie dismissing her, the hot mic moment, which we won't talk about. Her comments on racism in America, the Civil War, those have been well documented. Are these just sort of bumps in the road along the way to a strong finish in New Hampshire, or are we starting to see the first signs of a campaign that is losing steam?
I think we're certainly seeing the signs of a campaign that has no chance in November. Right? Those are all things that will come back to bite her and bite her hard if she is the nominee, which, by the way, I think is incredibly unlikely for many of the reasons that David just outlined moments ago. But yes, you can see that she doesn't have what it takes. You see that in the Koch brothers coming in and spending gazillions of dollars to build infrastructure for her in New Hampshire because she doesn't have her own. All these folks are throwing Band-Aids on a patient that needs surgery. But if something does completely catch all of us off guard on Tuesday, I think all of the things you just outlined are going to be tough for her to overcome in November.
Louise, the great thing about campaigns is that you get to see candidates grow or shrink or fall apart. How do you think Nikki Haley's campaign is doing, and how do you think she's dealing with the pressure now of it being pretty much in New Hampshire, at least, a race between her and Donald Trump?
Honestly, I think she's doing as well as she could in terms of, I don't think she had any chance whatsoever against Trump from the beginning because of the structural problems that she faced. And so in that sense, I think she's doing how we expect. But clearly, her inexperience on the campaign trail has already shown. And probably she is looking like she's going to, after New Hampshire, she might have a little bump. But then if she can't win in South Carolina, which is her state, it's over.
Yeah. So she is campaigning with possibly one of the most popular governors in America, Chris Sununu, by her side at every event. He set expectations for her pretty high. And the question now is, can she live up to it? Let's hear what the governor had to say in a recent interview.
No, it's a win and a reset button. If everyone that could vote in the primary comes out and votes, not only she's going to win in a landslide, and that's not an exaggeration. So you're going to see a record.
The bar for you here.
No, it's not an expectation.
He knows his state better than I do.
It's not an expectation. It's people getting excited. The expectation was we want a strong second place. We got that. We've already exceeded those expectations. Now we're trying to challenge to do something that none of you thought was possible, which was defeat Trump.
So that was the governor today after he had told Jonathan Karl with ABC that it was going to be a landslide in New Hampshire. Luis, is that sort of the danger of setting expectations so high for a candidate who is nowhere near first place?
Exactly, and you just saw the polls. She doesn't seem to be anywhere close to that. But she could, the chance she has is to change the electorate. And in that respect, we don't know, especially with all the comments Trump has made. Maybe people come out, they're excited to vote against or to vote for her so that they can stop Trump. But we're not. It's not clear.
If you were on the campaign and you heard the governor say that, landslide, do you just cringe a little bit knowing that you can't live up to those expectations, especially when it's Donald Trump?
Yeah, I definitely cringe. He put his foot in his mouth on there. But I'll tell you, my theory, Nikki Haley's running for 2028.
Okay.
Fair enough.
Speaking of, let's talk about 2028. Okay, let's talk about Joe Biden.
We're like 2 weeks into 2024, Sue. You're killing me.
I'm focused on 2028 because we've got Joe Biden nowhere to be found in New Hampshire. There's a Democratic primary, but is there really? Not really. There's a write-in campaign. Mayor Michelle Wu is heading up there. Governor Healy had been up there campaigning for Biden. What's your take on where the Democrats are right now. Is this going to hurt Biden in the long run? Is this going to hurt the Democrats? I'm talking, of course, about the non-primary for Democrats in New Hampshire.
Sure. Well, talking about 2024, because I am not mentally prepared to think beyond that. I'm barely prepared to mentally handle where we are. But listen, Joe Biden did not perform well in New Hampshire in 2020 and still won the state. So I know we say these things over and over again, but it is very early, folks. Lots of things can change between now and November. And David pointed out probably the single most important thing for Democrats in 2024, the atrocious overturn of Roe versus Wade, the Supreme Court's Dobbs decision, and the fact that Donald Trump is running all around the country saying this is the thing he's most proud of. That has been a winning issue for us over and over and over again in very red states. And that is what, probably more than anything, Democrats, not just the top of the ticket, but Democrats have going for us in November.
Luis, are you surprised that this write-in campaign hasn't gotten more publicity, hasn't been out front, or is this a case of let's not disturb the locals and just let Tuesday come and go and then move on?
Yeah, no, it doesn't surprise me. I think people talk about wanting to defy Biden, and people talk always about challenging the incumbent, but the actual people on the ground really have no incentive to. So people might say it in the abstract, but in actually doing it, no.
Is there a way to even gauge the success of this write-in campaign? I guess look at it compared to Dean Phillips, Marianne Williamson. I mean, how does the Biden campaign say? Strong finish for a write-in.
I mean, President Biden versus those two apples and oranges doesn't even begin to describe the differences. So I think they're going to say on to South Carolina.
Definitely.
All right.
All right.
Don't go anywhere
Stay
at
right
all.
there.
When we come back, Donald Trump wants the economy to crash soon. Don't take our word for it. He'll tell you himself. The former president seems to be coming up with a wish list for when he's back in office, including some highly unpopular positions. We're going to explore that next.
And a quick reminder, we'll have extended coverage of the New Hampshire primary Sunday morning starting at 9:30. We're going to be joined by a whole host of guests that are going to bring you a bevy of diverse opinions about the primary. We hope you'll join us then, and we're going to be back in just 2 minutes.
Welcome back to this live edition of At Issue. A few notes before we move forward. Do you want to get one more chance to see a candidate in person before Tuesday's primary? You're in luck. Scan the QR code right there on your screen, and that's going to take you to our candidate tracker. It shows all the events that are coming up in New Hampshire. Tomorrow, Donald Trump and Nikki Haley both have stops. So does Dean Phillips. Even Ryan Binkley has a stop in Manchester. You know who he is?
No.
If you don't, then you can go find out tomorrow.
And that's just part of our Decision 2024 coverage online. NBC 10 Boston is your home for all things New Hampshire primary real-time results as they come in on Tuesday night. Plus, you can access all of our exclusive polls, including the one we discussed earlier in the show.
All right, we are back with tonight's guests, Jesse Mermel and Luis Jimenez here at the table. Look, Donald Trump has said a lot. He's always said a lot, but recently he's been saying things that are making a lot of folks raise their eyebrows, more than usual. Some of the things he's been saying lately on TV, at town halls, have just been absolutely mind-boggling and jaw-dropping. Take a listen.
We love this guy. He says, "You're not going to be a dictator, are you?" I said, no, other than day one. We're closing the border, and we're drilling. After that, I'm not a dictator.
We have an economy that's incredible. We have an economy that's so fragile. And the only reason it's running now is it's running off the fumes of what we did, what the Trump administration. It's just running off the fumes. And when there's a crash, I hope it's going to be during this next 12 months, because I don't want to be Herbert Hoover. For 54 years, they were trying to get Roe v. Wade terminated, and I did it. And I'm proud to have done it. They wanted to get it back, right? You wouldn't have that. There would be no question. Nobody else was going to get that done but me. Yeah. And we did it. And we did something that was a miracle.
I'm no political strategist, but I don't think the message of I'm Donald Trump and I want the economy to crash is a winning one. But that's what he said. Those were his words. They came in just the last few days. You put it all together, the dictator comments, the economy crashing for his benefit. Sounds like we do have a candidate more interested in obtaining personal power at the expense of whomever. Of course, he is facing unprecedented legal challenges, a lot of cases coming and going, and it appears the best chance of him avoiding potential jail time is winning the election.
As he is wont to do, the former president was up late on social media at 1:59 a.m. He posted this on Truth Social. A president of the United States must have full immunity, without which it would be impossible for him/her to properly function. Any mistake, even well-intended, would be met with almost certain indictment by the opposing party at term end.
Even events that cross the line must fall under total immunity, Trump wrote, or it will be years of trauma trying to determine good from bad. Jesse and Luis, a lot of folks have been urging us in the media to take Trump at his word, take him literally when he says these things. What's jumped out to you about his recent forays into comments such as those?
Since 2016, when that man came down that tacky gold escalator, he has always said what he meant. He's not joking, right? For years, I'm joking. Why can't you take a joke? He is not joking. He means this dangerous nonsense quite literally. Earlier today, he said if the Supreme Court kicked him off the ballot, that there would be, I think his words were chaos and bedlam. In the wake of inciting January 6th, he is using these words knowingly. I mean, I know it's easy to chuckle about there he goes again, but this is dangerous. This is a man, to your point, Corey, who cares more about himself, saving himself, advancing himself, accumulating power, than about the future of this country, the future of people who'd be impacted by an economic crash, the future of so many people who are right now risking their lives to seek basic health care because Roe was overturned, and the future of our democracy. I mean, I know sometimes I feel Pollyanna-ish and seem Pollyanna-ish when I talk about this stuff, but there's so much at stake, and, you know, it just makes my blood boil.
Luis, I know one of the things in your wheelhouse as well is immigration, and certainly Trump has been saying a lot about just mass deportations without a lot of stats and figures, which is the other part of the dangerousness of some of the things that he says. What's your reaction when you hear this sort of language? Should we be taking him at his word?
Absolutely, 100%. And I think people that say things like, they're very selfish things. There's been politicians like that before, and there's politicians, American politicians and others. But in this particular case, what worries me is not so much exactly what he says, but that people hear that and like it. In poll after poll, people say similar things. And of course, he just won in Iowa. People have said, I've seen them say, I like that he says he wants to be a dictator, because there's a percentage of Americans that do want that. That's the concerning part. And in particular with immigration, there is a significant percent, even right here in Massachusetts, that want that. And that's kind of the problem. That's what concerns me.
How do we talk about Donald Trump and the things that he's saying that don't really make any sense? That's been the challenge. When I was up in Manchester this week, and he says something like, well, a president should have an immunity. Well, then Joe Biden should have immunity as well, shouldn't he, if that's the argument? But then it's only Trump's being persecuted. What's the right way to have a conversation, or should we just focus on something else?
Well, first, it's about defining your audience. As we just heard, there's a segment of the population that likes what he's saying. That's not who we have to talk to when we're talking about how absolutely ridiculous and contradictory and dangerous many of his statements are. And I think the approach to take is not to shame people, not to go at it from attacking, not to go at it from belittling, not saying, oh my gosh, you're so wrong, you're so, how could you believe this? It's to listen. So many people are coming from a place of fear about their own future, for their families, about the country, for their communities, for folks who are genuinely in the middle and who aren't those die-hard, loving everything Trump says folks. We have to come at them as human beings who are scared and trying to figure it out, listen, and then find a way to meet them where they are. Because the thing is, the Democrats are actually the ones fighting for working families, are actually the ones fighting on the issues that poll after poll tells us Americans care about. So we're winning in that front. We just have to figure out a way to communicate it better.
All right, before we go, Tuesday, going to be a big night. Can we get some predictions? Luis, we'll start with you. Give me a third, second, and first place. What do you think?
Well, I think Trump is going to win. I don't think there's any chance that Haley, but I think she'll do better probably than we saw in the poll. And third, I don't think it matters too much, but that's what we'll get.
50% of the Republican Party is going to reject the former Republican president of the United States in New Hampshire, if
That's
not
one
more.
way to look at it.
Yep.
Good.
Yeah. I mean, let me ask you this. The weather's supposed to be better than it was in Iowa. Are you going to be looking at turnout as well come primary night?
Absolutely. I mean, it's New Hampshire. That's the big question. All those independents who can vote in a Republican primary, are they showing up? And are they showing up for Trump, or are they showing up for Nikki Haley?
Luis, what are you going to be looking for?
Yeah, absolutely. And with this conversation we just had, who are these independents that are going to come out and they vote against Trump? An important sign.
All right. Luis Jimenez, Jesse Mermel, we appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
Always.
Thank you.
That's going to do it for tonight, but come back for tomorrow night. Spend a Friday with us. Democratic presidential hopeful Dean Phillips is going to tell us why he is challenging President Biden for the Democratic nomination. And we're going to be speaking with him live, asking him a whole host of questions. Chief among them, why did you wait so long to get into the race?
But you have a great ad. So
Yeah, that is true. All right, that's going to do it for tonight. For my colleague Sue O'Connell, I'm Corey Smith. Have a good night, and we'll see you tomorrow.